The morning sun shone brightly on the tall glass building of Global Future Tech, one of the most respected companies in the city. Workers walked in with files and laptops, speaking in low voices. Everyone knew that today was not just another day. Today was important. Today the company was showing its progress to a group of powerful investors. At the top floor, in the biggest meeting room, the air was heavy with tension. Large screens covered the wall, ready to display numbers, graphs, and future plans. The long polished table was filled with men and women in suits, all waiting silently. At the head of the table sat Mr. Rahim, the CEO of the company. Mr. Rahim was known as a man of high standards. He was strict, serious, and never accepted mistakes. His sharp eyes scanned the room as he adjusted his tie. For years, he had worked to make this company strong, and today he wanted to show that strength to the investors. His mind repeated the same thought again and again: everything must be perfect. The head of the technical team stood ready with a laptop connected to the main system. Assistants checked the microphones, tested the lights, and made sure the screens were clear. Investors leaned back in their chairs, waiting to be impressed. Finally, Mr. Rahim stood up. His voice was calm, but there was a hidden nervousness under his words. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "thank you for being here. Today, you will see how our company is building the future. We have worked with dedication, and we are proud to share our results." A small smile appeared on his face. Everything seemed under control. The technician clicked the button to start the presentation. And then the screens flickered. First once, then again. Suddenly, the charts and graphs that were supposed to appear disappeared into blackness. A loud error message flashed across the main screen: "System error, connection lost." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was heavier than stone. The technician tried again, clicking keys, restarting the system. But the same red words kept flashing. Investors began to shift in their seats, exchanging looks of confusion. Some even frowned, whispering quietly to each other. Mr. Rahim felt his heart pound. His hands grew cold. "What is happening?" he demanded, his voice low but sharp. The technician swallowed nervously. "Sir, the system crashed. We don't know why. It was fine just an hour ago." Mr. Rahim's jaw tightened. "Fix it? Now." The team rushed to their laptops. 2 more engineers entered the room, their faces already pale. They tried cables, checked servers, pressed keys again and again, but nothing worked. Every time they thought they had solved it, the screen went black once more. Minutes passed. Long, painful minutes. Investors began tapping their fingers on the table. One of them leaned forward and spoke in a cold voice. "Mr. Rahim, if your system cannot even stay online, how can we trust your company's future?" Another added, "We have other places to invest. We will not waste time." The words cut deeper than knives. Mr. Rahim's chest tightened. His company, his pride, his years of work all seemed to be slipping away. He tried to stay calm, but sweat appeared on his forehead. He turned to his staff, his voice louder now. "Do something. This is unacceptable." But nothing helped. The system refused to respond. Around the table, whispers grew louder. Some investors even stood as if ready to leave. The assistants looked down at their hands, unable to meet the CEO's eyes. Even the walls of the room seemed to press closer with the weight of failure. For Mr. Rahim, every second was like a heavy stone on his shoulders. He imagined the news spreading: "Global Future Tech fails in front of investors." He saw headlines, criticism, and mockery. His company's image would break, and with it, his dream. Inside, he felt something he had not felt in years: fear. But he could not show weakness. He straightened his back and forced his voice to stay steady. "Please wait," he told the investors, though his tone was tight. This will be fixed shortly. Still, his eyes betrayed him. They darted nervously to the screen, hoping for a miracle. The investors gave each other doubtful looks. One of them whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "A company that cannot even protect its own system should not be trusted with our money." The sentence burned in the room like fire. The staff kept trying, their fingers flying across keyboards. Yet the error stayed. The main screen glowed red, a cruel reminder of failure. Mr. Rahim's thoughts raced. If this continues, I will lose everything. If they walk out, years of work will vanish in minutes. What will become of us? At that moment, he felt as though the world itself had turned against him. The man who once commanded rooms with confidence now sat with shaking hands hidden under the table. And this was only the beginning of the day. The meeting room that once carried a sense of pride now felt like a place of heavy clouds. The investors' eyes were filled with impatience, and the soft sound of whispers felt louder than thunder to the people of global future tech. Mr. Rahim stood at the head of the table, trying to maintain control, but deep inside, his heart was trembling. He had faced challenges before, but this one was different. The company's future depended on this moment, and the system, the very heart of their work, was silent. The chief engineer, Salman, leaned over his laptop, his forehead wet with sweat. His hands shook as he typed commands. Next to him, another staff member whispered hurriedly, "Try the backup server. It might still work." Salman nodded quickly and tried, but once again, the screen flashed the same cruel message: "System error, connection lost." The investors groaned in frustration. One of them, an older man with a firm voice, said, "Mr. Rahim, we cannot wait much longer. Time is valuable. If your system is this weak, then perhaps your company is not ready for serious investment." Those words pierced the air. Employees looked down, afraid to meet their CEO's eyes. Some wished they could disappear from the room. Mr. Rahim clenched his fists under the table. His face remained still, but inside his chest, a storm was raging. He wanted to shout, he wanted to demand answers, but he also knew anger would not bring the system back. He forced himself to speak calmly. "Please, give us a few more minutes. My team is working on it." The investors exchanged doubtful looks. A few leaned back, folding their arms, already losing interest. Meanwhile, in the corner of the room, two junior engineers whispered in panic. "If this fails, we're finished," one said. "Not just us," the other replied, "the whole company could collapse." Their words were soft, but in the heavy silence of the room, every whisper felt like an echo. The technical team grew desperate. They connected cables, unplugged servers, and restarted devices again and again. Their faces grew pale, and their eyes red from staring too long at screens. Nothing changed. The error remained, unmovable and merciless. The assistants brought water for the investors, trying to soften their mood, but no one touched the glasses. Everyone's focus was on the frozen screens and the failure they represented. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The ticking clock on the wall mocked them all, each second reminding them of lost time. Mr. Rahim's thoughts began to darken. What if they leave? What if they pull out their money? He saw his dreams breaking apart, brick by brick. He had always believed in control, in strength, in the power of leadership. Yet here he was, watching his empire crumble because of a machine. Salman finally stood up, his voice shaking. "Sir, we have tried everything. The system isn't responding. We may need hours to rebuild it." Hours. The word fell like a stone in the room. The investors shifted again, some pushing their chairs back as if ready to walk away. "No," Mr. Rahim said firmly, his voice louder than before. "We don't have hours. We must solve this now." But even as he spoke, his mind was filled with doubt. His staff had given their best. They were skilled, trained, and experienced, yet even they had no answer. If they could not fix it, who could? One of the investors spoke sharply. We are wasting time here. This meeting is finished. Mr. Rahim's heart sank. He had fought for years to bring these people to his table, and now, in just a short time, they were slipping away. He imagined walking out of this room in defeat, facing his employees, his rivals, even his own family. The thought was unbearable. Desperation filled his voice. Please, he begged, something he never thought he would do. Just a little more time. The investors paused, surprised to see the usually proud CEO speaking with such urgency. Some stayed seated, though their faces showed little patience. The staff tried again, running checks, opening lines of code, searching for answers hidden deep inside the system. Their fingers moved quickly, but their hearts were heavy. Every failed attempt was another blow. In one corner, an intern named Bilal whispered, maybe there's something simple we're missing. But no one listened. The tension was too strong, and the voices of higher engineers drowned out the quiet suggestion. Mr. Rahim stood silently, staring at the red words on the screen. To him, they were not just letters. They were a warning, a reminder that control could slip from his hands at any moment. He thought of his father, who once told him, a leader must always be prepared for the unexpected. Rahim had always believed he was ready. Yet now, as he faced the collapse of his greatest presentation, he wondered if he had failed that lesson. The struggle continued. Engineers argued in whispers, trying new methods. The CEO pressed his lips together, refusing to show the panic boiling inside. The investors tapped their watches, each second adding more pressure. The room felt smaller and smaller, as if the walls themselves were closing in. And just when the hopelessness was at its peak, the glass doors at the back of the room opened with a soft sound. Everyone turned their heads. A simple figure entered quietly, carrying a mop and a bucket. Behind him walked a young girl with curious eyes. The janitor and his daughter had arrived without knowing that they were about to change everything. The heavy room, full of broken hopes and sharp whispers, suddenly grew quiet when the glass doors opened. A man entered slowly, wearing a simple uniform and carrying a mop and bucket. It was Mr. Karim, the janitor of the building. His face was tired from long hours of work, but his eyes carried kindness. Behind him walked his young daughter, Amina, a girl with bright eyes and a school bag hanging from her shoulders. She often came after her classes to wait for her father while he finished his duty. To her, the tall glass building was like another world, shiny, busy, and filled with important people. She never expected to step inside the top-floor meeting room, yet here she was. The room fell silent. The investors raised their eyebrows. Some looked annoyed, wondering why a janitor would enter such an important meeting. The employees exchanged uncomfortable glances, embarrassed by the interruption. Mr. Karim quickly lowered his head. "I'm sorry, sir," he said softly, his voice filled with respect. "I only came to clean the corner as usual. I did not know there was a meeting still going." His words hung in the air. He was ready to step back, but before he could, Amina tugged at his sleeve. She had noticed the tension in the room, the pale faces, and the red error on the big screen. "Baba," she whispered, "why does everyone look so worried?" Her voice, though quiet, carried clearly in the stillness. All eyes turned toward her. Some of the investors frowned. A few even chuckled softly, as if amused by the question of a child. One of them muttered, "This is no place for children." But Amina did not shrink. She tilted her head, studying the screen with innocent curiosity. "Did something stop working?" she asked. The technician, Salman, sighed heavily. "Yes. The whole system crashed. We cannot fix it." His words were filled with defeat. Amina stepped closer, her school shoes tapping gently on the floor. Her eyes stayed on the glowing error. Unlike the others, she did not show panic or fear. Instead, she looked calm, as though she was studying a puzzle. The CEO, Mr. Rahim, narrowed his eyes. "Young girl," he said firmly, "this is not your concern. Please step back." But Amina did not move. She pointed at the frozen computer screen. "Sometimes," she said slowly, "systems don't break, they just get stuck in the wrong loop." Her words were simple, yet strange. Some employees exchanged looks. How could a schoolgirl know about such things? Mr. Rahim almost dismissed her again, but his desperation made him hesitate. Every solution his engineers tried had failed. The investors were minutes away from leaving. And here was this girl, speaking with quiet confidence. He sighed and shook his head. "Child, this is not the time for games." But then, one of the junior engineers, Bilal, spoke hesitantly. "Sir, maybe we could let her look. Just for a moment. We have nothing to lose." The room stirred. Some laughed in disbelief, others whispered in shock. Letting a janitor's daughter touch the company's system? It sounded foolish. Yet the investors, curious now, leaned forward. Their expressions showed irritation mixed with interest. They wanted to see what would happen. Mr. Rahim looked around. His pride battled with his despair. Then, after a long silence, he nodded slowly. "Fine. Just 1 minute. If she fails, she leaves." The technician stepped aside reluctantly. Amina climbed onto the chair, her small frame almost swallowed by the large table. Her school bag slipped to the floor as she placed her hands gently on the keyboard. The room became silent again, so quiet that even the ticking clock sounded loud. She typed carefully, her fingers moving with surprising skill. She opened a window, checked lines of code, and whispered softly to herself. Her calmness shocked everyone. Mr. Karim stood in the corner, holding his mop tightly, his eyes filled with both fear and pride. He knew his daughter loved computers. Every evening, she would sit with an old second-hand laptop he had bought after years of saving. She would read coding books that others had thrown away, teaching herself with patience. But he never imagined she would sit in this grand room, in front of powerful men and women, with all eyes on her. Minutes passed. Amina's eyes never left the screen. She frowned slightly, then smiled faintly as if she had found something hidden. The engineers leaned forward, whispering to each other. "She knows what she's doing," one of them said in surprise. The investors, who had been ready to leave, now sat frozen in curiosity. Mr. Rahim's chest tightened. He wanted to believe it was impossible, but a small spark of hope rose in his heart. Could this girl really see something his entire team had missed? Finally, Amina looked up, her voice calm. "I think I found the problem." The room went still. Everyone waited, holding their breath, as the janitor's daughter prepared to show them something that none of the professionals could. All eyes were on Amina as she sat before the glowing screen. The large chair made her look smaller than she was, but her steady eyes carried a quiet strength. The room was tense, filled with doubt and curiosity. Mr. Rahim folded his arms, trying to hide his nervousness. He could not understand why he had allowed this moment. A child, the janitor's daughter, sitting where his best engineers had failed. Yet, a strange feeling whispered inside him, perhaps she saw something they did not. The investors leaned forward, whispering among themselves. Some smirked, expecting failure, while others showed a spark of interest. No one left the room now. Everyone wanted to see what this little girl would do. Amina placed her small hands on the keyboard and typed gently. The clicking sound of the keys echoed in the silent room. She did not rush. Her eyes scanned the screen line by line, as though she was reading a story. The chief engineer, Salman, whispered to another staff member, "What is she looking for? The whole system is broken." But Amina did not answer. She was lost in her own focus. Her lips moved slightly, repeating lines of code in a soft whisper, like a student reading her notes. She paused for a moment, then opened another window. The screen filled with complex codes, symbols, and commands. Most of the people in the room could not understand it, but Amina's face showed calm confidence. She pointed to one section and murmured, "This is looping wrong. It keeps calling itself again and again." The engineers stared. She had found something. Something they had missed in their rush and panic. Mr. Rahim leaned closer. "Are you saying the system is not broken, only stuck?" Amina nodded lightly, her eyes still on the screen. "Yes. It's like when a door keeps opening and closing because the sensor is confused. The system is trapped in the same step." The investors exchanged glances. One of them muttered, "Is this girl really explaining this to us?" But the truth was clear. Her words were simple, yet they carried meaning. Even those who did not know technology could understand the picture she painted. She took a deep breath and pressed a few more keys. The screen changed again, showing lines of errors stacked on top of each other. She studied them carefully, her forehead slightly wrinkled. Behind her, Mr. Karim stood silently, gripping his mop. His heart beat faster than ever. He had always seen his daughter's love for computers, but watching her in this grand room, surrounded by important people, made him realize how bright her mind truly was. The silence in the room was heavy, but it was no longer filled with hopelessness. It was filled with waiting. Waiting for something unseen, something unexpected. Amina worked slowly, methodically. She did not panic, unlike the professionals before her. She watched, observed, and only moved when she was sure. Every click, every keystroke was deliberate. The junior engineer, Bilal, whispered, "She's not rushing. That's what we didn't do. We panicked, but she's treating it like a puzzle." Salman, though embarrassed, nodded. She might be right. The investors shifted, no longer impatient but curious. Their sharp eyes, which once showed doubt, now softened slightly. Finally, Amina looked up and spoke in a calm voice. "I think I can free the loop, but I need permission to run a reset." Mr. Rahim blinked. A child asking him for permission to reset the system of his multi-million-dollar company. It felt unreal. But the truth was, none of his experts had given him even this much hope. He hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Do it." The room grew even quieter, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Amina placed both hands on the keyboard and typed a command with steady fingers. For a moment, nothing happened. The screen stayed dark except for the flashing error. Mr. Rahim's chest tightened again. Had he made a mistake? Then suddenly the error message stopped flashing. The screen froze, then lines of code began to move again, flowing downward like a river breaking through a blocked dam. Gasps filled the room. The investors leaned forward. The staff held their breath. Amina smiled faintly. "It's responding. The system is waking up." The chief engineer covered his mouth in shock. "She actually did it?" Mr. Rahim's heart raced. His eyes locked on the glowing screen. Hope, which he thought had left the room forever, began to return. The investors, who only minutes ago were ready to leave, now watched with wide eyes. Some even whispered words of surprise. And through it all, Amina stayed calm. She was not proud, not showing off. She simply did what she loved: solving problems. Mr. Karim's eyes grew wet. Pride filled his heart, but he said nothing. He knew this was his daughter's moment. The screen blinked once more, showing a new message: "System reset complete." The room erupted in whispers and gasps. The lifeless system was now breathing again. But this was only the beginning. The hardest part, restoring everything completely, was still ahead. And everyone, from the proud CEO to the wealthy investors, now knew that the fate of the company rested not in the hands of its engineers, but in the hands of the janitor's daughter. The room that had once felt heavy with failure now carried a spark of hope. The screens glowed again, no longer flashing the cruel red error. Instead, they showed signs of movement, lines of code flowing across like a stream after a long drought. Amina leaned closer, her small fingers steady on the keyboard. She was calm, but inside her heart beat faster than ever. She knew the reset was only the first step. The real work was to restore the broken parts of the system, to bring the data back alive. The staff gathered behind her, watching in awe. They whispered to each other. "She knows what she's doing," one said softly. "She's just a child," another replied, still unable to believe what they were seeing. "But look at her hands," said Bilal, the junior engineer. "She types with confidence. She's not guessing. She understands." Mr. Rahim stood stiffly at the head of the table. His sharp eyes stayed on the screen, but his mind was a storm. He could not understand how this was happening. His trained team had failed. His trusted system had betrayed him. Yet here was the janitor's daughter, working like she belonged in the seat of his best expert. The investors, once impatient, now leaned forward. Their eyes followed every flicker on the screen. Some of them, who moments ago wanted to walk out, now sat in silence, waiting for what would come next. Amina whispered softly to herself as she worked. She opened one file after another, searching for the weak points. She found where the data loop had caused damage and carefully rewrote the lines. Each correction brought the system closer to life. Minutes felt like hours. The room was so quiet that the soft tapping of her fingers was the only sound. At last, one of the screens flickered and came back fully. A large chart appeared, showing the company's growth numbers. A gasp escaped the room. "It's back," Salman said in disbelief. "That's one of the main files." The investors exchanged looks. Their doubt was changing into something else: curiosity, maybe even respect. Amina didn't stop. She moved to another window, her eyes focused. She cleaned corrupted files, fixed paths, and carefully restored the backup. Bit by bit, the lifeless system was turning alive. The staff began to whisper words of amazement. "She's saving us," one of them said. Mr. Karim stood in the corner, clutching his mop. His heart felt heavy with emotion. He remembered the nights when Amina stayed awake with her old second-hand laptop, practicing on broken programs. She had taught herself with patience, failing many times but never giving up. And now, in this shining glass room, she was proving her worth before the eyes of people who once ignored her. The tension grew as she worked on the final part of the system, the presentation files. Without them, the meeting would still fail. Amina took a deep breath, her small face serious. "This part is tricky," she whispered. "The data is scattered." Mr. Rahim stepped closer, his voice low. "Can you restore it?" Amina nodded faintly. "I will try." The investors watched silently. The outcome of this one attempt would decide everything. She typed carefully, calling back the backup files, reconnecting them piece by piece. For a moment, the screen froze again, and everyone's heart stopped. Then, slowly, the charts began to return. The numbers appeared, clear and sharp. The graphs glowed across the giant screen exactly as they were supposed to. The room erupted with gasps and murmurs. "She did it!" Bilal cried, unable to hold his excitement. "It's unbelievable," whispered Salman. Even one of the investors, who had earlier frowned in irritation, now whispered, "Remarkable." Mr. Rahim stared at the screen, his face frozen between disbelief and relief. His company's image had been saved by the last person he ever expected. The final graph loaded, showing the complete report. The presentation was whole again. The system that had died was now alive, strong, and shining brighter than before. The silence broke with clapping. It began softly, from one or two staff members, then spread around the room. Soon even the investors joined in, their applause filling the air like music. Amina lowered her hands from the keyboard. She turned and looked at her father. He smiled with tears in his eyes, nodding at her proudly. She had not just fixed a machine. She had changed the moment, the company, perhaps even her own future. Mr. Rahim finally found his voice. He stepped forward slowly, his eyes on the young girl. "You saved us," he said quietly, almost to himself. Amina looked down shyly. "I only helped," she replied in a small voice. But everyone in the room knew it was more than just help. She had performed a miracle where professionals had failed. The investors leaned back, their expressions softened. One of them spoke firmly, "Mr. Rahim, your company clearly has hidden talent." Mr. Rahim nodded, though his pride felt shaken. His heart was full of many emotions: relief, gratitude, and a touch of shame. For years, he had looked down on people like Mr. Karim, never imagining that from such a place could rise a mind like Amina's. The meeting that had started with panic had now turned into something unforgettable. And though the system was fixed, the real story had only just begun. The sound of applause slowly faded, leaving the room filled with a strange silence. The investors, the staff, even the CEO, all were still staring at Amina as if they had seen something unbelievable. The large screens now shone bright with charts and graphs, a perfect picture of the company's strength. What had seemed lost forever was alive again. But the real miracle was not the system. It was the girl who sat quietly on the chair, her school bag still lying on the floor beside her. Mr. Rahim stepped forward. His voice, usually strong and commanding, was now soft. "Tell me, how did you know what to do?" Amina looked down at her hands, shy under so many eyes. She took a small breath before answering. I like computers. I study them whenever I can." Her words were simple, but the meaning behind them was heavy. The chief engineer, Salman, leaned closer. "Study? Where? You are still in school, aren't you?" Amina nodded. "Yes. I go to school in the morning. But after school, when Baba is working here, I sit with my old laptop. It's second-hand, but it still works. I use it to practice." Her father, Mr. Karim, lowered his head, his eyes wet. He spoke softly, almost whispering. "She always loved learning. I saved for many months to buy her that laptop. It was old, but she never complained. Every evening, she would sit in the corner and read books people had thrown away. She taught herself." The staff stared at her in amazement. The junior engineer, Bilal, shook his head in wonder. "She's self-taught? That's incredible." One of the investors raised his eyebrow. "And where did you get these books, young lady?" Amina smiled faintly. "Some were given by neighbors, some I found in the recycling shop. Sometimes I go to the library. I don't always understand at first, but I keep trying until I do." Her words carried no pride, only honesty. The room grew quiet again, but this silence was different. It was not filled with fear or doubt. It was filled with respect. Mr. Rahim's chest tightened. He thought of the hundreds of resumes he had seen, the experts he had hired, the money he had spent on professionals. Yet this girl, with no degree, no fancy training, had done what none of them could. He asked again, his voice low but full of wonder. "You fixed our system without any formal training? Without a teacher?" Amina nodded. "Yes. I like to solve problems. When a system breaks, I don't see it as failure. I see it as a puzzle. Today, Your system wasn't broken, it was just confused. Her words, so simple, struck deeply in everyone's hearts. The investors whispered among themselves. One of them, an older woman, smiled slightly. She explains it better than many professionals I've heard. Another investor leaned forward. This girl has talent that cannot be ignored. Mr. Karim stood quietly, listening. Pride filled his heart, but he remained humble, his hands still resting on the mop handle. He had never imagined that his daughter's secret learning would one day be revealed in such a grand way. The staff, who once looked down on the janitor, now looked at him with new eyes. Respect replaced the old silence. Bilal whispered to Salman, "Do you realize? If she can do this at her age, imagine what she can become." Salman nodded, still in shock. "She's beyond us already." Mr. Rahim took a deep breath. He was a man who rarely admitted weakness, but he knew this moment required honesty. "Amina," he said carefully, "you did something no one else could. You saved this meeting, and perhaps even this company. For that, I owe you more than thanks." Amina looked up, surprised. "I didn't mean to save a company. I only wanted to help." Her innocence touched the hearts of everyone in the room. One of the investors spoke clearly, his voice strong. "Mr. Rahim, your company has not only shown its strength today, but it has also shown that talent can come from anywhere. This girl is special. She deserves support." The others nodded in agreement. The CEO's eyes softened. He turned to Mr. Karim, who stood quietly with tears in his eyes. "You must be proud of your daughter." Mr. Karim's voice trembled. "She is my pride, sir. I never had the chance to study, but I wanted her to have what I did not. She worked harder than I ever imagined." For a moment, the room was filled with emotion. Investors, staff, and the CEO himself all felt a deep respect for the janitor and his daughter. Amina sat silently, her hands folded, not realizing how much she had already changed in this one meeting. The screens behind her now glowed brightly, but no one cared for the charts anymore. The true presentation was Amina herself, the story of hidden talent, of determination, of a light shining from the most unexpected place. And though the system was fixed, the real lesson was just beginning. The meeting room, which had been filled with fear only hours ago, now glowed with hope and respect. Everyone's eyes stayed on Amina. She sat quietly, almost shy, as if she still could not believe what she had done. Mr. Rahim, the CEO, stood tall at the front. His face was calm, but his heart carried a storm of emotions. He had seen many moments in his long career: failures, victories, losses, and growth, but never something as powerful as this. He cleared his throat and looked at the investors first. "Ladies and gentlemen, today you came here to see numbers. You came to test whether this company is worth your trust. And I will not lie, the system crash almost destroyed everything we worked for. But because of this young girl, we are standing strong again." The investors nodded, their expressions showing admiration. Mr. Rahim turned toward Amina. "You showed us something greater than skill. You showed us courage, calmness, and a heart that never gives up. At your age, you did what trained experts could not. That is not just talent. That is greatness." Amina looked down, her cheeks warm with embarrassment. "I only wanted to help Baba," she whispered. Her father, Karim, quickly wiped his eyes. He had been silent for too long, and now his voice came out heavy with emotion. "Sir, I never asked for anything. I only wanted to earn honestly and give my daughter a chance to learn. But today, she has given me more than I ever dreamed. She is my blessing." Everyone in the room felt their hearts soften. Even the investors, known for their strict business faces, looked touched. One of the senior investors, the elderly woman, spoke gently. "Mr. Rahim, this girl deserves an opportunity. Not tomorrow, not later, now. The CEO nodded. He turned back to Amina, his voice steady. Amina, would you like to be part of this company not as a visitor, not as just the janitor's daughter, but as someone who belongs here? Amina blinked, confused. Belong? But I'm still in school. Yes, Mr. Rahim smiled, and you must finish your studies. But we can support you. We can give you a scholarship, books, a proper computer, and even mentors to guide you. You will continue your studies, but also learn with us, side by side with professionals. What do you say? The entire room went silent, waiting for her answer. Amina's hands trembled. She looked at her father, her eyes wide with disbelief. Baba, is this real? Kareem's lips curved into the proudest smile of his life. Yes, my child. It is real. This is your moment. Amina felt tears sting her eyes. For so long, she had studied quietly in the corner of their small home, never thinking anyone would notice. And now, the CEO himself was offering her a future brighter than she had dared to imagine. I would love to, she said softly. The room erupted in applause once again. This time, it was not just for saving the system, but for celebrating the birth of something new, a dream turning into reality. Mr. Rahim raised his hand to quiet the claps. Then it is settled. From today, Amina will be under the company's scholarship. We will invest not only in machines and systems but also in people, especially those who prove that brilliance can come from anywhere. The investors nodded firmly. One of them even added, with talent like hers growing here, our trust in this company is stronger than ever. The staff exchanged smiles. Some looked ashamed for ever ignoring Kareem before, while others felt inspired. Bilal whispered to Salman, we should learn from her, not just about technology, but about passion. Salman nodded. She reminded us why we first joined this field, to solve problems, not just to earn. Kareem stood quietly at the back, his mop still leaning against the wall. But his posture was no longer small or invisible. He stood with dignity, respected not for his job but for the strength of his daughter. When the meeting finally ended, people began leaving with lighter steps. Investors shook hands warmly, staff spoke with excitement, and everyone carried hope in their eyes. Mr. Rahim walked up to Kareem and Amina before leaving. He placed his hand gently on Kareem's shoulder. You raised her well. A father's effort never goes unseen. Kareem lowered his head humbly. Thank you, sir. I only did what any father would. Then the CEO looked at Amina. Study hard. Work harder. And remember, this greatness does not ask where you are born. It asks how much you are willing to give. Amina nodded, her heart swelling with determination. That evening, as she and her father walked home together, the city lights looked brighter than ever. Kareem carried his mop on one shoulder, but for the first time, it felt lighter. Amina held her worn-out school bag, but to her, it felt like treasure. They walked in silence for a while until Amina finally whispered, Baba, one day, I will build systems that help the world. Not just companies. People too. Kareem smiled through his tears. I believe you will, my daughter. I believe you will. And as they disappeared into the quiet streets, the story of the janitor's daughter spread far beyond the walls of that meeting room, carrying with it a message no one would forget: greatness can rise from anywhere.